Okay, time for a new video, and whether you are somebody new to my channel or you are returning to my channel to watch this video, it is greatly appreciated. As always, I'm filming this video in one go, so if I stumble over my words moving forwards, apologies about that, and also apologies if the quality of this video is fairly poor as well. If there's any lag, anything like that at all, sadly it can't be helped, and hopefully it's not too much of an issue for you. This is yet another Eurovision related video here on my channel, specifically Junior Eurovision related, because at last I am finally sitting down and essentially previewing the upcoming edition of the JESC, which, as I talk to you now, is just over a week away. The 22nd edition of it will take place on November the 16th, a Saturday, the first time it will be staged on a Saturday for almost a decade, at the Caja Mágica in Madrid, Spain. The first Eurovision event of any kind on Spanish soil since the adult competition of 1969. Now, of course, Spain did not win Junior Eurovision last year. France did on home soil, and we know that France are absolute powerhouses at Junior Eurovision these days. But instead of hosting the competition again on French soil, Spain decided to take up the reins. As it says here, in November last year, France Télévisions announced that talks would be conducted with the EBU regarding the hosting of this year's upcoming event. However, other countries had expressed interest in staging Junior Eurovision 2024, and the French broadcaster did not want a French monopoly on Junior Eurovision, having already hosted the event twice in a 3-year span. They chose not to stage it again, and so Spain, who were the runners-up last year, took up the mantle, which is fantastic. In terms of the artwork and the slogan, it's Let's Bloom. Purple and orange, the main colour scheme it appears to be, and flowers will play a predominant part in the aesthetic of this year's competition. We do have the stage design as well, but I'm not going to go through that. I believe that has been constructed now, or it's very close to completion, because rehearsals will be beginning very shortly within the next couple of days. 17 nations are involved, no debuting nations. The United Kingdom are not involved, which is a real shame, because we came back a few years ago, we had Freya Sky, she did very well, winning the public vote, and then of course we had Stand Unique a year ago. But sadly, we are not taking part in 2024, and I don't really know why. I don't think the BBC have given much of an answer for this. I wouldn't be surprised if it's because of poor viewing figures. I wouldn't be surprised if it's because so few people in the UK have any concept of Junior Eurovision whatsoever. I can't imagine it's because the results were disappointing, because they weren't. So I suppose it's a case of just waiting and seeing if the UK will be back in 2025 and beyond. However, Cyprus returned for the first time in many years, as do San Marino. It says right here, Cyprus are returning for the first time in 6 years, and San Marino for the first time in 8 years. So it's fantastic to have them back. In terms of the visual design, once again, it says here the theme art features the image of a blooming flower, which references the blossoming of young artists. Absolutely. The presenters are the 2014 Spanish adult competition representative Ruth Lorenzo, Marc Clotet, who is an actor and model, very suave, and Melanie Garcia, who won The Voice Kids in Spain several years ago and represented her country at Junior Eurovision in 2019, with Marte finishing third. She is still only 17, so a very young co-presenter. It's also possible that Maria Isabel, who won for Spain at Junior Eurovision 20 years ago this year, could play a part as the opening or interval act. I would be very surprised if we don't see her performing her winning song from 20 years ago at some point during the broadcast next week. So, let's go through the songs. I'm not going to go through these in any great detail. I've actually been taking into consideration a comment made by Rachel, whose channel is The Peace Around. I'm sure some of you are familiar with her work. And during a Q&A that she did very recently, she mentioned how she doesn't really cover Junior Eurovision because essentially you are judging kids and it's not exactly fair. And I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable talking about Junior Eurovision, to be honest with you. I don't know what it's like for people even older than me, even journalists who cover this event. So moving forwards, maybe next year and beyond that, if I'm still making videos on YouTube, I will have to think carefully about how I address Junior Eurovision, if at all. Certainly, I am somebody who is not the target audience for this show. I am in my early 30s. This is a competition that is clearly aimed at youngsters, pre-teens. And so the older I get, I suppose, the less interested I am. Certainly, some of the songs are pretty good, and it is quite admirable that all of these artists can go out on a pretty big stage and sing their hearts out. That has to be commended. And in one or two instances, absolutely, the artists have written their own material or co-written their own music, which is also quite admirable indeed. But anyway, with that being said, let's go through this. My handwriting is absolutely atrocious, but I've made over 2 pages of notes. I finished listening to these songs on Spotify a short time ago. I'm not going to be talking about the music videos because although I've seen them, they don't really matter. And I have also ranked the songs, and I will go through that ranking shortly, but that should not be taken seriously at all. As always, feel free to let me know your thoughts on any of these tracks, anything I've discussed today, by leaving a comment down below. And as always, there are links in the description to my other social media pages. Check them out if you so wish. The running order was actually announced before all of the songs were released, which was quite interesting. The song opening the show, the song closing the show, and the host nation Spain, their positions were drawn at random weeks ago for fairness. Italy are opening the show, Malta are closing it, and Spain are song 10 of 17. So, let me begin by talking about the Italian track, which is called Pyjama Party, which means Pajama Party, and is performed by Simone Grande. And he won the 2nd season of The Voice Kids in Italy almost a year ago. This song is co-written by Switzerland's 2008 adult representative Paolo Meneguzzi, who was also in Italy's Sanremo Festival many years ago. He's actually my 2008 winner in Belgrade. He's co-written this along with 2 other individuals. So, this is a pretty decent opener. I'm just going to read out my notes as they're written here. I'm not going to go into any great detail, as I said a moment ago. It's a decent opener. It's a pop song. It starts off slow but builds in momentum. He does look a little nervous in the music video, but come on now, that's not much of a criticism at all. I just hope that he is brimming with confidence when he opens this competition next week. It's in a mixture of English and Italian, and I don't really think it goes well together. Some of these songs have clearly just thrown in a few phrases in English for the hell of it, and a lot of the time it's fairly unnecessary, if you ask me. Let me know your thoughts on that, because I think in this Italian song it's not quite working too well. Love is the answer, he sings, and it's a pajama party. Okay, fair enough. What have I written here? The chorus needs a little more punch. Yes, I feel as though the verses are fairly promising, but then the chorus is a little bit of a letdown, maybe. Maybe there's not a great deal of progression in this track either. I will be repeating myself a few times in this video, I should say that much. Doesn't have a splendid finale. No. I'd say that it starts off quite well, but then sort of peters out after about 2 minutes and doesn't really go anywhere terribly dynamic or exciting. But it's not a bad effort at all, and it is a pretty solid opener to proceedings. However, I'm not sure it's going to do too well in the voting. Let's not forget that you can still vote for your own country, and Junior Eurovision is never going to improve until that rule is scrapped. But you can still vote for your own country, and there's worldwide voting, and it opens at some point and then closes and then opens again during the show. This doesn't really matter. You probably know all about it anyway, and it's online somewhere too. But yes, I don't see Italy doing terribly well this year. Song 2 is Estonia. Now, really, this should be challenging for the win. The running order doesn't matter too much at Junior Eurovision, but I do think this has been screwed over a little bit by being on so early. This is Estonia's 2nd ever Junior Eurovision entry. They debuted last year with a lovely ballad, which didn't do that well. This is far stronger, and it's more up-tempo. It is by Annabelle, and it is called Tanavad, which means the streets, and Sven Loimus has written this. And anybody who follows the adult competition knows for sure that this man has written so many Eesti Laul songs, it's unbelievable, going back years and years and years. He wrote Randajad for Urban Symphony, he wrote Let's Get Loud for Sun Tribe in 2005, I think. He is everywhere, pretty much every year in Estonia. He's a big, big name. And he has written this song. And I have written here that it's quite modern, contemporary, and mature. Absolutely. I think over the past few years, maybe you agree with me on this, Junior Eurovision doesn't necessarily feel so junior anymore. You do get a few artists, even though they're only about 13 or 14 years old, but you do get a few songs, absolutely, that feel quite grown up. They're trying to be quite grown up, and sometimes you might think to yourself that they could easily be a song in a national final for the adult competition, or indeed a song at the actual adult competition in May every year. This definitely feels like quite a mature entry to me, quite an accomplished track. It also starts off quite slow in the same way the Italian track does, but does build up. Decent vocals. It's a pop song with electro elements, I guess. It's a shame it's on so early. There's a drum and bass type thing going on as well with the instrumentation. The song maybe does lose a little bit of magic as it goes on into the final third. Again, I'll be saying this a lot in this video, but it's almost as if there needs to be a little extra pizzazz towards the song's end just to make it really stand out from the field. It's more likely to flop than succeed. I like the fact it's in the Estonian language. And that's all I've really got to say about it. It is one of my favourites this year. I think it's a very solid effort. And absolutely, I think a lot of people are really enjoying this Estonian track, and it should do well, but we know Junior Eurovision voters, don't we? Moving on to Albania. This is song 3. It is a ballad, which will come as no shock. Anybody who knows Albania at the adult competition, and indeed the junior competition, knows that Albania just love female-driven ballads. That's what we've got again. This is Valazoi, which means dance, by Nicole Chabeli, and she won the Albanian national selection back in September, and there's not much else to say about it. This song then, not one of my favourites at all, I've got to be honest with you. I think it's a little overproduced, if I'm being honest. It has a bit of a fairy tale-like sound. At times, it is reminiscent of Albania's 2008 entry in the adult competition, which is actually a bit of an underrated gem, but there we are. There's an almost R&B-like beat later on. Nicole is a decent singer. The instrumentation is quite loud and bass-driven. It's very bass-heavy, I would say, in the chorus. And I feel as though they could have reined it in a little bit better. Of course, we did have a revamp for this song, and I'm not sure the revamp has been massively successful, but it is what it is. It's trying to be stirring stuff, but doesn't quite hit the mark, and in all honesty, it is quite unmemorable too. I know I sound harsh, but that's just my thoughts on this Albanian track. Moving on to song 4, which is the Armenian entry. We know that Armenia generally do very well at Junior Eurovision. This is Leo with Cosmic Friend. I've written here that this is likely to do very well. It is playful. Something that I think Armenia do very well is they take, I don't want to use the word mature again, but it's the best way to describe it, I guess. They're very good at mature type sounds, but making them age-appropriate for Junior Eurovision, if you see what I mean. Anyway, that's what I've written here. It's a little bit disco. I've written here that it's a throwback disco sound. Potential for fun and lively staging. It's in the Armenian language, but there are English lyrics too, which again, I'm not sure are super necessary, but it is what it is. If anything, I think it works better here than it does in the Italian track, which I mentioned earlier on. For me personally, the chorus is a little disappointing, and it's actually not quite as engaging as it perhaps should be. If anything, this song's success will rely on the presentation of it, because the song, as it is, I don't think it's overhyped. I really don't think so, but I'm not loving it nearly as much as a lot of other people. I've seen plenty of people's rankings over the past few weeks. A lot of people have this ranked highly. For me, it's okay. I think he seems like a pretty good performer, a bit of a showman type figure, and I think that can be appreciated. It worked for France, Lissandro, a couple of years ago. Will it work for Leo? I don't know. I don't think this is Armenia's strongest effort they've ever had. It's not bad, but I'm not really on board with it. Gotta be honest. Song 5 is a song I am more on board with. This is Cyprus, their big return, Maria Pissarides with Crystal Waters. Now, this song is co-written by Sofia Patsalides, who represented Cyprus at the Junior Eurovision contest of 2014 with the Pio Amor Primero, which is one of the great Junior Eurovision songs we've perhaps ever had, certainly in my opinion. This is a summery sounding tune, very easygoing. Again, perhaps in the final third, it doesn't have that little move into top gear extra element that it perhaps needs, but that's not much of a criticism. I think the staging is really key for this one, because I do feel, like with Estonia, I feel as though Cyprus could flop this year, even though a lot of people are really responding warmly to this track. People need to be on board with it. People need to really vote for it. And the song on its own is fine. Have that little extra sparkle with the presentation, and the votes could pour in. Let's not forget that there is a jury vote as well, of course, and I think that the juries will like this enough. Certainly it should finish in the top half. Staging will be key. May fall to one side in the voting. There is a little bit of a spoken word part in this song, and I'm not usually a fan of that in any type of song. Eurovision, Junior Eurovision, non-Eurovision related stuff. I'm not really a huge fan of spoken word stuff in music, I've got to be honest, so that's a bit of a disappointment. But the whole song, besides that element, is pretty darn decent, I've got to be honest. I like her very much. The music video's not too bad. Like I said, it's easygoing. It's refreshing, it's sweet, it's calming. I think it should do quite well, but again, we know Junior Eurovision voters. We move on to Song 6, which is France. And we know that France almost always win these days. And this is also likely to challenge for the win. However, I do not consider it France's strongest effort that they've ever had. I think it's a very solid showing. I think they're playing it fairly safe. Last year's French entry, I've got to be honest, I'm surprised that song won, because I don't think it was the strongest performance or song in last year's event. But it is what it is. This is a similar deal. It's not the strongest song in this year's lineup, but that might not matter one jot. This is Titouan with Comme ci, comme ça, like this, like that. Starts off fairly slow indeed, but then it turns into a more uplifting, happy-go-lucky sort of tune. The music video, he's performing in some sort of, I don't know where he's performing, a shopping centre, a train station, something like that. It doesn't really matter. It's not the most high-budget music video, I would say. Fairly playful stuff. Maybe not quite as full of pizzazz as some previous French entries, as I've written here. I feel as though France are becoming a bit predictable with their sound. Certainly the Netherlands are, and I think France are going very much the same way. You sort of know what you're going to get from them every year, and that's a bit disappointing. Yeah, I've written that, for me, it's on par with last year's winner, in terms of I like it as much as the French entry that won 12 months ago. It's going to do well. It might win. Certainly the juries love France at Junior Eurovision. But where it might come up short, where Titouan might come up short, is in the public votes. He might just be lagging behind one or two other countries. We'll wait and see. It's a solid showing. Then we have North Macedonia. This is another solid showing. Song 7, Anna and Alexei with Marathon. Again, it's a song that starts off fairly slow. I can imagine this with fairly dark, moody lighting, a moody atmosphere on stage to begin with. The vocals go fairly well together. It's a pretty solid entry. I'm really repeating myself, so apologies here. However, it runs out of steam fairly quickly. I feel as though once you've heard the chorus once, that's about it. Nothing else really changes at all. It stays at pretty much the same pace for the entire 3 minutes. It doesn't bring in something more dynamic or interesting or inventive later on. That's where this song comes up short, and I can actually see this struggling to get a lot of love in the results from the jury and the public. But it's not bad. Poland's entry, Song 8, They're not quite as strong as they used to be at Junior Eurovision. This is Dominic Arim with All Together. There has been a bit of a revamp for this one, I believe. He's a fairly solid singer. It's a ballad. It feels dated, got to be honest. Dated but sweet enough, I've written here. If anything, it's a nice change of pace, because the French entry is up-tempo, North Macedonia's entry is fairly up-tempo. This just brings things down a notch in terms of pace, and I think some people might really appreciate that. I can imagine him being alone on stage. I don't know if they've said anything about the staging for this one. Does he really need dancers? Probably not. If his voice is commanding enough, he can be there front and centre all by himself, working his magic. We know that Poland can benefit from a diaspora vote, and of course they can vote for themselves, which has definitely, I think, helped their cause in the past. But this is not a terribly strong effort, in my opinion. I would be surprised if Poland finish anywhere above 8th in this year's contest. Moving on to song 9, and it's another ballad. This is Georgia. Again, maybe not quite as strong at Junior Eurovision as they used to be, but every couple of years they have a bit of a gem. This is Andrea Podkoradze with To My Mom. And when I listened to this song earlier, I think it was the first time I'd listened to it in full, ever. I don't mind it. There's a sort of ticking clock and piano sound at the start. It's accessible stuff. It's not trying to be too fancy or anything like that, which I can appreciate. It's quite sweet in terms of its message. It's beautiful, but just not that memorable. It's subtle at times and somewhat dramatic at other times. The juries will like it more than the public. Yes, I think so. We've had instances in the past where Georgia's results have been quite unusual, in the sense that the juries do like a Georgian entry, but the public not quite so much. And I think we are going to get something like that again this year. I think the juries will appreciate this a lot more than the public will. But that's the Georgian track. I don't really have anything else to say about it. There are strings and the piano I mentioned earlier, and it's a nice tune. I just don't think it stands out enough. The Spanish entry, which is up next, does stand out enough. This is the host nation's track, song 10, Chloe de la Rosa, with Como la Lola, 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 and so on. If you've heard it, you know what I'm on about. It translates as like Lola. A lot of people are really enjoying this. Is it stronger than last year's Spanish effort? Probably not, in my opinion, but it's definitely a decent showing. And it's so apt for Junior Eurovision. It's carefree, it's fun. I think it's appealing to people in that age bracket. This is bound to challenge for the win. In fact, it probably will win. This is the one to beat. As I've written here, clearly the one to beat. If anybody finds anything irritating about this track, it sounds harsh, but it might be Chloe's voice. I don't know what she sounds like live, but I've seen a few comments online saying that they can't quite get on board with her vocal presentation, if you see what I mean. It doesn't really matter to me at all. I was listening to the studio cut, and yeah, that sounds completely fine to me. It is cheerful, playful, I use that word again, engaging. There's a little bit of sass. It's not a million miles away from the Spanish entry, which won Junior Eurovision 20 years ago this year. It will go down a storm with the home crowd. There's a bit of a key change at the end. It is what it is. It could be the theme tune to a kids' TV show. Solid stuff. I've got nothing else to say about it. It's fun, and it's going to stand out. Great stuff. Moving on to Germany, song 11. This is Bjarne with Save the Best for Us. There was a short national final in Germany. This was the one that came out on top. This is perhaps the most underrated song this year, based on what I've seen online, people's rankings and things like that. Not too many people are really loving this German effort. I actually think that it's getting a bit of a bad rep at the moment. There's a piano at the start. Again, uplifting. He's talking about how the world is beautiful and things like that, so the message isn't exactly super original, but that's fine. It might not be dynamic enough. It's cutesy, a bit underrated. There's quite a rapid beat later on. It seems as though it doesn't know exactly what it wants to be sonically, because it does seem to go from being quite melancholic and hopeful in terms of its sound, and then right towards the end it's really quite frantic, as though he's really hitting home the message of this tune. Do you see what I mean? Part of me feels as though the whole production could have been slightly tighter somehow. I don't know. Can't see this doing too well, but it's not a bad song, and his voice is not too bad either. Simple as that. As for the Netherlands, song 12, this is Stay Tuned with music. I usually love the Dutch entries at Junior Eurovision and the adult competition as well, but I agree with what a lot of other people have said recently, which is that the Netherlands need to do something different now, because they always seem to have bands like this in their national selection, and sometimes they win, and again, it's like France a little bit. You know what you're going to get. This is so typical from the Netherlands at Junior Eurovision. A band that have been thrown together, a song with a very generic message. The song is called Music, for crying out loud. It's a pop song by a put-together band. Bog standard message. A little bit funky in places with the guitar. Yeah. What else have I got to say about this? It's lukewarm. There you go, that might be the best word to describe this Dutch effort. It's not bad, but it is certainly not really bowling anybody over at all. So, I think this will finish in mid-table. I've got to be honest with you. The Netherlands can do very well in the public vote. They do generally get quite a bit of public support, but this isn't standing out much at all, which is a fatal flaw for an up-tempo song. As I've said before, it's the same at the adult competition. I have nothing else to say about this. I usually have the Netherlands in my top 3 at Junior Eurovision. They were my winners last year by a very narrow margin. This year, that is not the case. Got to be honest with you. Then we have San Marino, song 13. This is Idols SM with Come Noi, which translates as Like Us. And this is written by Miodio, who represented San Marino in the adult competition. It was their debut entry in 2008. So there you go. They're back, having written this song. This is clearly not the strongest song this year. I don't want to say it's one of the poorest, but it's definitely not one of the best. It feels like a demo song, in all honesty. It feels as though it was put together fairly quickly. I don't think the group are the problem at all. They sound alright. If anything, I feel as though they deserved a better song, something a bit more polished, something that stands out a little more, something that feels a little bit more, I don't know, energetic, perhaps, because it's almost as if this is just meandering along, not really going anywhere. I know this sounds harsh, but it is what it is. Lacking oomph, slight electro sound, could be awkwardly staged. I don't know how they're going to stage this in a way that really captures the attention of all of the millions of people that might be watching, and indeed people online, anybody who's going to vote. Are people going to be drawn to this one? I just don't think they are, unfortunately, but it's nice to have them back. It's nice to have San Marino involved again. We move on to Ukraine. This is also a contender for the win, and Ukraine haven't won for a good few years. This is Artem Kotenko with Hear Me Now. This is another pop electro song. He's a pretty good singer, fairly charming. It's a very polished effort. I think the staging could be very interesting indeed. They could do something interesting with the lighting and the choreography. It could be very slick. It could be the slickest performance this year. We'll wait and see. There's a bit of falsetto, that sort of thing going on at points in this song. He is hitting those high notes in the studio cut, absolutely. Haven't watched the live performance at the national final for a while, I have to be honest. Yeah, I don't want to say it runs out of steam at all, but maybe I was getting a little bit less engaged with it towards the end, which is not what you want. On the whole, though, this is clearly a very strong showing, and it is bound to do well. Certainly, I think this is going to finish in the top 5. I'd be surprised if not. We then move on to Portugal, song 15. This is Victoria Nicole with Esperança, which means hope, and she has written this herself, and credit where credit is due. It's fantastic. I think she won the Voice Kids in Portugal, but don't quote me on that. This is a really terrific ballad. It's not doing anything fancy. The vocals speak for themselves, if you see what I mean. I am hoping with the staging there'll be a piano, which she's not obviously going to be playing live, but the emphasis must be on her voice, because she's probably the strongest singer this year. It's very powerful. If anything, it becomes even more powerful as it progresses, which is nice, but it's not overpowering in terms of the instrumentation. I've written here, piano-driven, simplistic but effective. There are strings, big vocals. It really gets going after the first minute or so. Yes, we know that Portugal as well can do very well in the online vote. Remember O Rapaz a few years ago? That did far, far better than I expected. Far better. And with the juries on board, more with this one, I would say, Portugal are contenders to win. They've got a good place in the running order. And it will be interesting to see who lets this track down, because at this moment in time I don't think Portugal are going to win. They'll be up there. Will the juries let this song down? Will the public let this song down? Or will it be a case of both the public and the jury love this one, but not quite as much as some of the other more up-tempo tunes? We'll wait and see. It's a really strong effort though, and she's written it herself, which has to be applauded. Lovely stuff. Then we have the penultimate track, which is Ireland. I feel as though Ireland are fairly underrated at Junior Eurovision, to be honest with you. This is Enya Cox-Dempsey with Lekeila, which is a phrase that sort of means together. At least that's what I found online when I was looking it up. I have looked at the lyrics for all of these songs, but it was a long time ago. What I will say about Enya is that she looks so much older than some of the other singers this year. I don't know how old she is, about 15 maybe, but she looks, quite mature. And this is a fairly accomplished song. It's a pop number. I know in the music video she's having a bit of a boogie, so maybe we'll see that on stage in Madrid next week. There's a moment before the first chorus where it becomes quite bassy and moody, and then it kicks into gear. I quite liked that little change of pace and that little change in terms of the sound. That was very nice. I used the word uplifting again, because it sort of is. It's quite catchy. It has a bit of a hook to it. Some of these songs maybe have repetitive choruses, and they don't really have anything to hook onto, and therefore you can't necessarily remember too much about the song itself when you think about it in your own head. Other songs clearly stand out more. I think this one does stand out. I think it does have a fairly catchy hook. I like her very much. Yeah, again, it's not over the top. And I hope that the staging is on point, because Portugal's song, as I just said, is likely to do very, very well, especially in the jury vote. And Malta on after Ireland, again, the juries might be far more on board with that song. So I'm hoping there is something about the Irish performance that makes it live long in the memory. I know it's on towards the end, but it does need something to make it really stand out between these two ballads. And that leads me on to Malta. This is Ramirez Chibaras with Stila Chkena, which I'm surely mispronouncing. It means little star. This is the first time Malta at Junior Eurovision have a song entirely in Maltese. It's taken them long enough. I had a feeling he was going to win the Maltese selection. It's cutesy. Again, it's not cloying or overpowering in terms of its sound. It is a ballad. This is a song that could easily be in the national final for the adult competition, if you ask me. Maybe it was in contention for that. I don't know, you never know. Music video is quite nice, but that doesn't really matter. Does become more powerful later on. Feels quite Disney-esque, absolutely. It ends somewhat abruptly, in my opinion, and the juries may absolutely love it. The public less so. Don't have anything else to say about it at all. He did win the Maltese selection a couple of months ago. So there we go. That's me going through all of the songs. I have to apologise because this video is clearly all over the place and I've repeated myself so many times, but there's only so many things that you can say about these tunes. I am not a professional music journalist, if you didn't know by now. So, is it a stronger lineup than last year? Maybe not quite, but certainly there are some very solid showings indeed. This is my ranking as of right now. Do not take it seriously. Bottom to top, San Marino, Albania, Georgia, Poland, Malta, Armenia in 12th, North Macedonia, Germany, Italy, Cyprus, Ukraine, Ireland 6th, Portugal 5th, Netherlands 4th, France 3rd, Estonia 2nd, and Spain 1st. That is a pretty solid top 3. As I said earlier, I am hoping Estonia are not screwed over by being on so early. And France, they'll challenge for victory, but I don't think it's their year. I can see Spain triumphing on home soil. That is the song to beat by Chloe de la Rosa. So there we go. I will talk about Junior Eurovision again at some point. Certainly I will be making a prediction for the results. So I will be covering that in a video at some point before the competition next weekend. And I will tell you my updated ranking as well, because it's bound to change ever so slightly before the event takes place. I may talk about the rehearsals at some point as well, if I see them, which I'm sure I probably will. Do keep an eye on the joint Instagram page, link in the description to that, rajc.esc, for loads of Eurovision related posts. I'm trying to be quite active on there at the moment. Wishlist posts, all of that business, it's all systems go. And that is it. Hopefully the quality wasn't too bad. Apologies for rambling so damn much. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and bye for now. See you again soon.